All right, welcome everybody. We are so thrilled to have you with us today. We've got a great presentation planned for you discussing securing financial services in a quantum and AI age, insights into post-quantum cryptography. My name is Meg Gleason, and I'm the head of user experience and product adoption here at QSecure. For those of you who are here with us for the first time, here's a little bit about QSecure. Our charge is to bring post-quantum cybersecurity to government and enterprise to ensure a secure future. We understand that the impact of emerging technologies, including AI and quantum computing, are already here, and our specific cybersecurity solution, QProtect, leverages today's technologies to bring post-quantum protection to all endpoints in a network. During today's webinar, we will take a look at how AI and quantum are changing the paradigms of security. We'll discuss the implications of these emerging technologies for cryptography, along with strategies for business leaders and cybersecurity professionals, considering how to secure critical data now. Through our discussion, we aim to highlight the opportunities for you to take action today and help secure the future. A few housekeeping rules. We have a Q&A at the end of the webinar, so throughout, please feel free to type your questions and contact information into the Q&A section of Zoom, or shoot us an email at info@qsecure.com, and our team will be sure to respond quickly. This presentation will also be recorded and available on our QSecure website or on our YouTube channel, so go ahead and follow. All right, we've got some wonderful speakers today. Pat, next slide, please. We are excited to have with us Rebecca Crothamer, co-founder and chief product officer here at QSecure. She's a Forbes 30 under 30 in quantum computing. She was named top 12 women in quantum computing and is a member of the Global Futures Council for the Quantum Computing at the World Economics Forum. She'll walk us through a little bit of QProtect in action and also be the guide in our fireside chat with the legendary Peter Bordow. He's the SVP, Distinguished Engineer and Chief Architect of Post-Quantum Cryptography and Quantum Systems and Emerging Technology for Information and Cybersecurity at Wells Fargo. Peter is a true visionary and for over 30 years has been a technological leader and is shaping the way that many people think about emerging technologies through his research. We're absolutely thrilled to have him with us today to educate others on strategies for quantum technology and cryptography. Next slide. We'll get started with just a little bit of context setting, understanding that there are some major investments being made across the globe to advance both AI and quantum computing technologies. It's no surprise that these investments are being made, and we'll take a look in just a minute at the magnitude of these investments. But when we consider the technology, it's no surprise that there's a huge push to bring these things to light. AI and quantum on their own hold the ability to solve complex problems, optimize processes across industries, and enable rapid innovation. And when they're combined together, AI can leverage quantum computing capabilities for enhanced machine learning, enabling breakthroughs for drug discovery, financial modeling, and many more industries, as you see here on the left. But with as much good as these emerging technologies can bring, there's also incredible power and almost guaranteed promise that they will be weaponized. We'll go a little bit into the risks in just a moment, understanding how these technologies really can be applied to cryptography, big focus on the conversation today. But let's just take a step back and look at the magnitude of the investments going towards these technologies. Next slide, please. Here is a brief overview of the public investments being made in quantum technologies. You can see over on the right, this observable trend over the last 5 years for increased spending, public spending of foreign nation states to bring about quantum technologies, including quantum computing. It includes the US, our allies and adversaries alike, major global movement to bring this about. And then when we consider our own US government, we can see that there's been an increased trend of spending for quantum focused on R&D programs. And these programs over the last couple of years were enabled with major regulatory advancements with presidential memorandums and the Quantum Computing Cybersecurity Preparedness Act. Next slide. And as we look at the impact that these investments have on our industries today, we want to sort of bring it home here, looking at really what these technologies mean for us. So there are over 20 billion devices that require upgrades in order to have their cryptography withstand quantum computing. But even with that major upgrade in place and ahead of us, our data is already being leveraged and exploited with store down, decrypt later attacks. Adversaries are targeting sensitive data with long shelf lives, grabbing it up and just holding on to it, waiting to crack it open once they have a strong enough quantum computer, which is a timeline that is shortening and shortening as each day passes. And when we consider the industries that need to look at what critical data they have that has that long shelf life that's being targeted for SNDL attacks, we look to McKinsey for a great overview. You can see here a wide array of industries across the board are impacted by quantum computing. And we look at the top section in the right hand corner there, insurance, public sector, and banking. And today we're going to focus really in on the financial sector, understanding that this has application across industries. Next slide, please. So as we consider the implications of quantum computing for the financial sector, just take a step here and look at the way that data flows in every minute of every day through financial institutions of broad scale, from headquarters to bank branches, all the way down to the everyday user, customers, and employees. Data is constantly moving, and the sensitive financial data is ripe for attack. Consider IP, payments, trading, and this data moving from data stores to end devices, all of which are vulnerable. And we can already see folks addressing this. Great news, it's not a story of despair. There are solutions out there, and we can already see some early movers, seeing JP Morgan, Visa, and SoftBank already addressing the problem for their customers, which is really exciting. And next slide, please. And understanding that there is this growing demand as with AI and quantum computing as a catalyst, there are emerging technologies that are coming about to help solve this problem as these threats evolve faster and faster. And QProtect is our solution. It is an all-in-one software solution that leverages quantum safe cryptography for secure communications wherever data travels, and empowers security leaders with complete cryptographic agility and control for adaptive protection against classical and emerging threats. With customers demanding post-quantum, it has become a top priority for solution providers, as evidenced by our strong partnerships who now offer QSecure. We are proud to enable our partners and government with QProtect to ensure a secure future. And I'll turn it now over to Becca to give us a little bit of an inside tour on how QProtect works. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meg. I am really excited to get to talk to y'all today because usually when people learn and hear about the quantum threat, they get left in the fear of, okay, this is bad, so what? And that is exactly why I love my job, because I get to show you the so what and the why it's actually so easy to start addressing this. NIST has been thinking about this problem for a long time. They've had a lot of smart people working on solutions. Something that often gives people the aha moment is that you do not need a quantum computer to fight quantum. You can use all classical software. There are ways to do this very, very simply, and I'll show you the way that we address it. And so, without further ado, and Pat, maybe you can let me share my screen. But while I pull this up, I'll ask you to imagine for a second that you are the CEO of QBank. I'm going to share my screen, Pat. So you're the CEO of QBank. I know there's a lot of financial services leaders in the audience today, so this won't be too much of a stretch. So QBank is a large financial services firm. Your clients are starting to hear about this quantum threat thingy in the news, and you're starting to get these requests, or people are starting to ask you, your clients are starting to ask you, do you protect my data from the quantum threat? Maybe it's a subset. Often financial services firms are hearing this from high net worth individuals or organizations that bank with them. And this is, so you decide to start, as is often the case, with your online or mobile banking application. And you spend an hour with us, and I won't go through that today because we don't have an hour here, but would love to show anybody who's interested the process of setting up. It's very simple. You spend an hour with us to enable this for your end users, or perhaps a targeted subset of your end users. And that's it. Your clients don't need to download anything. They don't need to change their behavior in any way. And this uses technology that gets to virtually all the browsers that have been updated at any point in the last 5 years. So now I'll show you the end user experience. All right, can I get a thumbs up on my screen?
Looking good.
Thanks, Meg. Okay, so welcome to QBank. So you'll see this loading screen, and this is totally optional. This is just for you to see that something's happening in the background. But in fact, our goal is actually to be invisible to your end user. Again, I'm using a standard browser, Safari right now. I didn't load anything, but now that it was that simple, there is a post-quantum or quantum safe session initiated. So yeah, I can mess around. I can put some money in my bank account. And all of that data in transit, any of the transactions that are happening, that is now quantum safe. And that's it. So I will now show you what it looks like to your, this is the end user, this is your client using an online banking application. Now I'll show you your cybersecurity leader or your admin, what their experience is of this. And so I'll switch over here. This is the admin panel. And there's a lot of cool stuff. You'll see that I just came in from New York. The most important thing that I want to show today is this. And this is an accounting of all of the different post-quantum channels and what algorithm they're using. And so QBank, you'll see, let's make sure this is refreshed so the accounting is accurate. So QBank, which I just showed you, is using Kyber 512. And just kind of a side note, and sorry, some of this is inside baseball, but it's important. NIST, again, has been standardizing these algorithms. There's nothing proprietary here. Kyber, Crystal's Kyber, has been named the provisional standard by NIST. There are other finalists as well, and we'll get a little bit more into that. But these other algorithms that you'll see are additional finalists because it's early days. It's early days in standardization of what is quantum safe cryptography, what cryptography takes over in the post-quantum world. And so you'll see a lot of those represented. You have Kyber 512, you have Kyber 768. Those numbers represent key links. So just keep in mind, we have 111 sessions on Kyber 512, and I'll show you that as we load QBank once again. We'll now have another post-quantum channel enabled. And so if I refresh, you'll be able to see 112. So again, that's simple. And now I want to show you the very coolest part. And I'm the product person, so of course I'm going to nerd out on this, but this is the dashboard. Very cool thing about this is you get a control plane. You get to control all of your cryptography. You get to take control of it. You don't have to rely on vendors, on open source, on pointwise upgrade cycles, right? You don't have to DIY and end up with out of whack stuff. So you get this control plane to manage all of your cryptography. I also want to emphasize that today I'm showing the using quantum protecting a web application and a mobile application, but this works just as well on the network side. You can do service to service, application to application. They're just not as relatable. So I'm showing here today web application. The top one, QBank, you'll see this is the proxy that we're using for QBank. I can go in and edit. And this is the awesome part. This is crypto agility. And this is the name of the game. It is not about upgrading to algorithm after algorithm. It is about taking control over your cryptography. And so you'll see in these configurations, there are two main concerns that come up when people think about upgrading to post-quantum. The first is performance. Is this going to have a performance impact on my system? And the answer is no. Because of the way this is designed, you really only have to do this handshake once every so often. It does not actually impact any of the throughput, any of the performance of your network, which is awesome. Number two, it is early days of standardization for these new algorithms. Again, we're using new cryptography to fight quantum threats, to fight this store now, decrypt later, especially now. And so, people are nervous. Should I start adopting this? And the answer, we fully agree that no, you should not wholesale start adopting PQC algorithms. You should be layering them over today's encryption. And that's exactly what you saw with QBank. You had TLS wrapped in what we call QSL. And so you had both a layer of classical encryption and post-quantum. So if for any reason into the future, the post-quantum algorithm proves to be vulnerable, you still have at least as much protection as you do today without it. So that is very, very cool. Second piece of this is to give you this redundancy. Here's where you configure the chems, and this is the algorithm that we're using to make this quantum safe. I won't go into static and ephemeral, but I will point out that the cool thing with these is that once again, to answer that question of, okay, what if Kyber fails? And that's exactly why NIST has these finalists. They're based on different mathematical primitives. So if the logic of Kyber is broken, you still have different types of logic to defend against quantum computers. And that's, you'll see here, classic and CLEAS and HQC, these are based on different types of math. And so one of the very, very cool things that we can do is we can actually give you layering, again, without performance impact. So here you see 3 different algorithms represented, and you have 3 different points of redundancy. So if one was to fail, again, you have classical still, you have all of these different layers of post-quantum. So you're about as protected as you could possibly be, again, without performance impact. So what I'm going to change here is Kyber 512. So there could be any number of reasons to change, right? Kyber, it is unlikely, but in the event that Kyber fails at some point in the future, you may want to be able to change it. Or there are also good reasons you may want to be able to change your chem. We can up the key length. Right now it's 512, so the lowest. You could up it to 768, 1024 if you want higher security. Of course, getting this right is really important. So we have a lot of guidance in this panel to tell you, okay, you should probably do this. This is what's recommended in this scenario. For demo purposes, I am going to switch over to HQC 128. And I'm going to save that. Okay, cool. So if you remember, we had Kyber 512 here. And it incremented by 1. Now I'm going to close this. I'm going to reopen QBank. Oh, let's check. Okay, so HQC 128, we have 17. So let's reopen QBank. All right, we've got an HQC session started, and now we have 18. So it's that simple. We did not have to bring down the web application. We did not have to rip and replace anything. You just changed out the post-quantum encryption method that you're using. Once again, layered with all classical. And it really is as simple as that. Happy to talk more with anyone who's interested in learning more. Again, I'm the product person. I love this. I got into this field to help create a better, safer future. And what I really, truly want everyone to walk away with today is that we're in control. We can use this upgrade cycle as an opportunity rather than something that we get stuck in, as an opportunity to really enhance our cybersecurity posture to one that is more adaptive. And I really hope everyone walks away with a sense that it is addressable today. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and I will call the amazing Peter Bordow up onto the stage. And Peter is going to help. Peter's been a leader in this space for decades. He has all of the patents in quantum, and really he's been a leader in emerging technology since emerging technology was probably coined as a term. So this guy is a legend. And he works really, he has a really great stance on leading the quantum and post-quantum industry as a whole and encouraging collaboration. But I think his day-to-day is at Wells Fargo, leading the charge at Wells Fargo. So he can really give us an insider's view. And of course, the view is someone who's really pulling together a lot of areas of this ecosystem. So Peter, great to have you. And we'll start off with something, the fun stuff, right? So when we talk about quantum as a whole, what are you most excited about in terms of quantum being a game-changing technology, not just for financial services, but for the, I guess, the world as a whole?
Hi, Rebecca. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to help inform and spread the message here. So I'm very appreciative of that. So to your question, well, first, let me do a little bit of housekeeping here, right? So today I'm speaking on my own behalf, right? Obviously, I am deeply involved in this work, not just at my current firm, but throughout the entire ecosystem. But today's conversation is a little bit more casual. So the opinions and information that I share really is personal for me, okay? Now, having said that, I think quantum represents what many term the second great quantum revolution. That is to say, right around 1925, we had what I call the first great quantum revolution, where we distinguished and engineered solutions for some of the principles of modern physics, right? Which gives us everything from television to cell phones to satellite communications to GPS and laser beams, and pretty much every modern convenience that we enjoy today came out of that first great quantum revolution. But out of that, right, in 1925, 1926, all of the quantum mechanics principles were also defined, but really had no engineering or practical application. But that has changed in the previous decades. And now we are on the precipice of what I call the second great quantum revolution, where we can see the properties of quantum mechanics begin to integrate into technology as a whole for our species. And worldwide, we're talking about a profound impact virtually in every application of technology, whether it's communications or navigation, even geology and medical devices and pharmaceuticals and finance. I mean, there's really no area that's going to be untouched by this. And we're barely on the starting line here, right? We have decades of future to unfold before we really know what the world's going to look like in 2050 or in 2300, right? It's going to be quite an amazing journey.
That's awesome. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, and I know, on that note, it's such an exciting time, and I think we both got into this field because we still have the capability to really shape how it develops, because there's not a whole lot of people in it. It's still the very early days where we're building the foundations. I came out of AI, worried about where we're going with technology. So the opportunity to really be in it at the ground level is such an exciting one. And I think on that note, we've talked a little bit about education. I think this is a huge part of this, right? And I know you do as well. Do you have any thoughts on kind of how we get education out there and where we start?
Yeah, sure. So I think this is a multifaceted answer. I think we're seeing the development and application of more focused curriculum in this space. I've heard some academic entities now have quantum information systems and related degrees, right? You don't need to be a physicist to actually help shape the future here. But I think there's an important point that sometimes goes undiscussed, and I think that's early education. And I can tell you as a parent and as an observer in this space, it's almost always easier for younger folks to be able to understand and adopt the strange principles of quantum mechanics than it is for we seasoned adults. That is to say, we develop a normalcy bias on how the world is, right? It's very pragmatic. It's based on a lot of the curriculum that we all went through, right? But quantum thinking in those strange phenomenon and the implications of entanglement and superposition and tunneling and all of these things, these are very difficult concepts to adapt based on the normalcy bias that we've all developed over our careers. So I'm a huge proponent for introducing these concepts of what the foundations of this new quantum-enabled world will look like and operate from in early education, middle school, high school. When you talk to these kids and you explain things like superposition and entanglement, they don't have to give up decades of what they've been adapted to, right? They adapt quite quickly. So those are my thoughts there.
Yeah, no, I agree so strongly. I think that's beautiful. It can be really hard as an adult to gain an intuition for, classical physics is all right. I throw a ball at the wall and it bounces back. I know that I've done it enough times that I learned to expect that. But and quantum physics is harder. It's harder to gain that intuition. So I've heard it said, maybe we should teach quantum physics in grade school or high school before we teach classical, or maybe we should teach linear algebra before we teach calculus.
Yeah, but even more than that, I think from a conceptual standpoint, students don't necessarily need to know physics or algebra to begin to think about what the implications are of these strange behaviors, right? It's almost like teaching anti-logic compared to today's traditional bias, right? And I think that not only excites the students, but gives them that sort of conceptual grounding for application of linear algebra or physics down the road, right? As opposed to learning the nuts and bolts before they get the game plan, right?
No, totally. I think that's great. And I think that also kind of broadens out the world. I think what we see a lot of the time is that some of the understanding gets really locked in the STEM field, but everyone is benefiting or affected by this technology. So bringing everybody in to have, it doesn't have to be strictly by the book, but early developing that intuition so that everyone can comment on how these things turned out, whether it's, you don't have to be an engineer to do that. Yeah. And before we get into the PQC side or the post-quantum side, who is someone that you admire in this field that you would recommend everyone go out and listen to talk if they're interested in more education?
Well, that's a great question. Listen, there's no shortage of great minds in this space. But for me, quite honestly, I have to say that one of my heroes is Dr. Michele Mosca. He's attached to Waterloo University and is Canadian and has arguably been in this space longer than almost anybody else. He's been developing techniques and technologies and thought leadership for over 2 decades now, and always inspires me, articulates the scope and depth of this problem unlike anyone I've seen. And if you haven't had the opportunity to listen to Dr. Mosca, I strongly encourage that you Google him, look him up on LinkedIn, and follow him. He's got some real trailblazing thoughts.
Mosca is awesome. And Mosca came up with the often referenced Mosca's theorem?
Mosca's theorem, right?
Mosca's theorem. And it's about kind of how you have to think about making the upgrade to post-quantum. It's worth checking out. And I think I didn't know this before, but I think Mosca was part of the team that implemented the very first quantum algorithm on the very first primitive quantum computer in like the 90s.
Yeah, I believe you're correct. Yeah. And since then, he's done a lot of work, not just on classical algorithms running on digital computers, but he's really been a trailblazer in quantum mechanical security. So quantum key distribution, quantum key management, entanglement-based authentication mechanisms, and things like that. So yeah, he's quite the thinker. Totally.
And I think that's a great segue in, but I think also a point that we might not have touched on yet is there's a lot of ways to think about quantum safe technologies. We've talked about this too. There's the opportunity for all of these to interoperate, right? QKD is based on quantum physics. It's a very cool technology. You can use, it's often recommended that you use post-quantum strategies to scale and QKD to operate in kind of highly secure co-located environments. But there's a lot here, and it's a very fun ecosystem.
Yeah, I can add some color there. So
yeah.
For me personally, I think there's a couple of really important tenets that I operate from. And whether it's at my firm or whether it's in speaking engagements to the financial ecosystem or consortiums or whatever it is, 2 of my foundational principles are interoperability or vendor agnosticism, as well as agility, right? So it's important that we develop a solution suite and a strategy that really builds upon a fundamental principle of interoperability in and among products and vendors. So whether you're talking about firewalls, proxies, HSMs, or you're talking about cryptographic libraries or some flavor in between, right? Vendor lock-in is a very familiar term for most executives, right? And so I personally work very hard to spread the message and to articulate the value proposition of vendors working in a collaborative way. And so what we're really shooting for here is a completely heterogeneous but interoperable global financial ecosystem where all the pieces work together and everybody who's contributing works very hard to make sure that their puzzle piece fits into the larger picture.
Yeah, love it. No, we take exactly the same stance. I mean, we have to do this together, and it really is about migrating to a posture of adaptability and agility, and you can't do that being locked in. So we make it a focus to build modularity in and interoperability in, and empower other applications that you might already use to be post-quantum. We partner with Red Hat. Also, we do a lot of government work, and some of those organizations want to bring their own cryptography. So there's a paradigm shift in how we build. And to your point, right, we have to learn how to attack this as an ecosystem, and rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, well said.
And yeah, and so kind of shifting into the post-quantum side and the financial sector side a little bit. You led the charge to issue an FSI-SAC report on preparing for a post-quantum world by managing cryptographic risk. It's a great report. I would highly, highly recommend anyone, especially those in governance in the financial services sector, to check it out. It very clearly lays out how you should think about the actions that you take today. And I guess my first question is, one, you end with the conclusion that we cannot afford to wait. Can you comment on how you talk to people about the importance of preparing for quantum computing now, despite, there is not a fault tolerant 4,000 qubit quantum computer that exists to crack today's encryption. So how do you talk to people about that?
Yeah, let me answer that in a couple different perspectives. So from a threat perspective, you're right. Cryptographically relevant quantum computer is still quite a bit of distance away, right? We're growing incrementally on the number of qubits. We're growing on the fidelity of qubits. We're even progressing significantly in error correction. And quite frankly, there's something of an arms race in different modalities, whether it's superconducting machines or photonics or ion capture, or whatever it might be, right? So it's a very fast changing landscape in an unpredictable growth curve, right? Unlike Moore's law, which is very linear, very, very predictable in the evolution of technology, quantum technology, and specifically quantum computers, don't necessarily follow that predictable linear curve, right? There's peaks and valleys. There are quantum summers and quantum winters. So the predictability about when that Q day is actually coming for a cryptographically relevant machine, big time moving target, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is that that's not the only threat. You've alluded to this sort of save now, harvest, or harvest now, decrypt later threat, which is upon us today. And then there's other threats, right? We've seen momentum building in what we call hybrid or alternative approaches to cryptanalysis. So there was a paper published late last year. In fact, I think it was Christmas Eve, by some researchers internationally who claimed that they had a scalable solution for factoring very large numbers into its prime constituents that didn't rely on future quantum computers, and in fact could be demonstrated today. Well, since then, that paper has been disproven, right? It's not a scalable solution, but there have been others, right? And I think we're seeing a trend in focused efforts for these alternative or hybrid approaches to cryptanalysis. So that's the other thing I want to say about the threat vectors, right? It's very uncertain. There's threats now, there's threats way down the road, and there's threats that we can't tell. So covers the whole gamut. So getting started now, yeah. So it's not just like dropping in an algorithm and you're done for the day, unless you're a very small mom and pop shop, right? Typically, we're talking about a complicated landscape, right? So for large organizations, whether you're in finance or insurance or whatever the industry might be, you could be talking about millions or dozens of millions of endpoints that you have to be concerned with. And these are not just users or customers, right? We're talking about internal infrastructure. We're talking on-prem, off-prem, cloud-based. We're talking about peripheral devices like, so in the banking world, be like ATMs, right? We're talking about physical security, video feeds, building metrics. We're talking about personnel stuff. We're talking about an enormous landscape. And we're talking about a lot of depth, whether it's layer 0 all the way up to layer 7 of the OSI model, everything from infrastructure up through applications. So the larger your organization is, the more integrated you are into an industrial or a sector ecosystem, your concerns and your landscape of potential threat vectors is going to go up almost geometrically. So yeah, there's a lot of work to do. And to the papers that you're referencing, Rebecca, we laid out in those artifacts for FS-ISAC the fundamentals of how to get started identifying your threat landscape, right? So cryptographic asset discovery, inventory, risk assessment, prioritization, even before you get to solutioning, right? You have to know where your priorities are. And then for a large organization, these cryptographic transitions can often take a decade or more, right? History shows us that. So if you haven't already begun thinking about this, you're kind of behind the curve. And if you're in a very large organization, if you haven't started really looking at how to identify the entire landscape of your threats, then you really are behind the curve already. And I don't want to leave the audience with the impression that the sky is falling, but to a large degree, the writing's on the wall, right? And one day that will come. And not that the sky will fall, but sort of like, you've been warned, what have you been doing for 10 years, right? So like that.
Yeah, well said. We work with a lot of groups that, you know, I think most large financial services firms have at least started this journey. And we work with a lot of firms that are in the discovery phase. And we get to come in and actually sit alongside that discovery inventory phase and start taking, you upgrade your application and you have that information of that you gain from that really important process. So that's often really fun to kind of see how that unfolds. And you're talking the store now decrypt later threat is that's often why, you know, we get called in, right? And that's why we're talking about financial services today. And also we do a lot of work with the public sector. These two are often referred to as like the primary, because there is that shelf life of data, right? You don't want your bank account information stolen. It's going to be good 5 years down the road. You don't want your national security secret stolen. On the financial services side, what do you see as being the prime targets today of those store now or harvest now decrypt later threats?
Well, that's really hard to put a fine point on. I can share with you my thinking in this area, right, without too much specific. So data value longevity is really sort of the ground layer here. So, and that can be kind of deceiving, right? So, for example, the FDIC has a records retention schedule. And whether we're talking about, say, an auto loan package or a home mortgage, there are different retention periods for the financial industry. But those things can be kind of deceiving. So let's take an example. In an auto loan package, the FDIC record retention is 6 years. But really, if you look deep inside the auto loan application package, there's a lot of data fields that outlive that 6-year time frame, right? So whether it's your social security number, obviously, or even a home address, perhaps, you have to be very, very careful when you do that sort of risk assessment of where those more valuable exposure points are. I can tell you also that the bad actors that are engaging in this save now, decrypt later strategy, they have a lot of resources and they have a lot of intelligence, right? Good or bad, let's be real about it. There's a lot of sophisticated mechanisms at work here. And quite often, data payloads can be, there's a lot you can surmise about a data payload after capture. So things like endpoints, where's the data coming from, where's it going to, what's the frequency of the transaction, the size of the payload. There are a lot of metadata elements that you can surmise what a potential value of a payload is. Now, let's not get too crazy here. If you're buying, deodorant on an online shopping platform, that's probably not a high value target that a nation state would be after. So we'll keep that in perspective, right? again, this is not the sky is falling for your average consumer. We've had so many data breaches, whether it's the Social Security Administration or one of the largest retail brick and mortars in the country. Our data has been compromised. Okay, it's out there. There's a very high percentage of folks' information that has been in the wild. So we have to temper our urgency with some smart strategy, right? So really what we're talking about is real critical payloads. So say packages of information all grouped together, or extremely sensitive strategic communications given an entity's context, whether it's government or one of the primary large banks or one of the large insurance companies, right? So I think you need to do a little sort of algorithmic approach on what your threat vectors really are and where your urgencies should be applied. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, well said. I think when we like come in the early stages, when people are just starting to ideate on this for their organization, a lot of times they're lost because they're like, how do I eat this whole elephant at once? And I think it's refreshing for people to understand, okay, no, you don't have to protect the milkshake, buying a milkshake at the corner store transaction.
Yeah.
You identify those high value systems and then you go after that first. And yeah, I think that makes it more approachable for people.
Yeah, so let me zero in. So it occurred to me, right? One of the primary evaluation criteria would probably be the value of the target. That is to say, not necessarily a large organization, but perhaps a key decision maker, CEO or CTO or CFO of a prominent entity, whether it's a bank or some other entity, right? Think about what that threat vector is for potential extortion, blackmail, strategic compromise, industrial espionage. So it's not just everybody's loan packages, right? It also extends or transcends to individuals' communication where those individuals are potentially super high value for a bad actor nation state, right? Just put a point on it.
Right. No, that's exactly right. And I was kind of alluding to that earlier in the demo. It's, oftentimes it's either the high net worth or certain organizations that are coming and saying, okay. And one thing, and you and I have talked about this, Peter, but I think it's worth noting, we think about the data that's harvested now for layer decryption in terms of what we can do with it today, right? And we kind of have a feeling for what we can do with a data analysis in this right here now. But one thing, I got the privilege to work on with the World Economic Forum on some governance principles for sort of like ethical development of quantum. And one thing that's I think is really important to note is 10 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago, right, in a pre-chat GPT being popularized world, we didn't know what we could do. We didn't have a sense for what we could do with data now. When we have a quantum computer with 4,000 qubits that can break, RSA 2048, when we have that scale, that quantum computer can also do some fantastically amazing things. And, a lot of that is likely to be in getting insights from data. And so, all that is to say, we also need to think about protecting the types of data that we protect today in terms of what we might be able to glean from that data into the future, right? Maybe some of us have used 23andMe, or we have genetic information. We can only do so much with that today. What can we do with it in the future? And it's that kind of mindset I think people need to be in terms of protecting their data, their clients' data, their partners' data, and so on and so forth. But yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to editorialize for a second. Look, you make a really good point. I think you can demonstrate and point to examples where the pace of change in technology is increasing, right? So we don't just have high technology maturity velocity, but we have acceleration. And to your point, where these technologies converge, right, we're getting exponential value and almost epiphanies about how these things can be used together and what we can do with them, right? And that goes back to my earlier point. We're really on the precipice. We're in such the early stages of understanding what the implications are of not just the technologies, but the convergence of these technologies, right? And so I tell everybody, we reserve the right to wake up smarter every day, right? Because we just don't know what we don't know yet.
Totally. And I think that feeds in really well to something else you mentioned in your in the FSI SAC report is adaptability and this idea of cryptographic agility. I'll often talk about the Q Secure suite as, not just post-quantum. Post-quantum is not an end in itself. There will be cryptography upgrades. And as, like you're saying, technology advances faster and faster, threats advance faster and faster. We need to be adaptable. And so I'll often talk about what we do as crypto agility, even more so than post-quantum or anything else.
Yeah, you bring up such a good point, right? And so I can tell you that there's a lot of conversations developing around defining what crypto agility really is at all the different layers, right? Even in terms of process framework, right? Governance and things like that. But you make a really good point here. Q day, that day when a cryptographically relevant machine becomes available, that's not the end, right? That's not the finish line. That's kind of the beginning, the start line. We're talking about decades and decades of cat and mouse to come, right? In the quantum world, there's only a handful of productionalized algorithms compared to the digital world where there are hundreds of thousands or more, right? So we don't really know anything about what hasn't been invented yet. So I urge this everywhere I go. You need to set yourselves up for the long game, right? To your point, if you don't build upon a foundation of crypto agility, you're going to be going through this exercise from scratch every single time. And maybe it's every 10 years, maybe it's every 5 years. I don't know, but I can tell you personally speaking, I've been in this game for 35 years. This thing is just beginning.
Yeah, so well said. I have two more questions for you. We're running up on time.
Yeah.
First, do you have any, just quick thoughts? Do you have any advice for people in the audience thinking about initiating this, especially those within the financial services sector and leading their organizations or hoping to lead their organizations?
Yeah, so start with getting informed. So if you're in the financial sector, even if you're not in the financial sector, as you urged, I urge you to read the FSISAC publicly available documents. That will give you a very significant grounding on what the scope is and what our strategic recommendations are. There are some really good government resources as well. And I don't have the links off the top of my head, but after the quantum National Quantum Initiative and a lot of the PQC directives from the White House and so on that have been published, there's a lot of information becoming available. There's also a lot of good information in academia. And really just a 30-minute Google search should give you tons of sources. That's how you start. And then you find someone that can be a champion in your organization. If you have a large organization, even more important. You need to understand the messaging, the consistency, the vision, the strategy. You need to inspire others, build a community within your organization of understanding and contribution. This is a team sport. You're not going to find an individual to come in and save the day. This is going to require collaboration, cooperation, communication, and yeah, like that.
And we can send out we'll send out a follow-up email to attendees. And Peter, if you want to share any of those links that you love, we'll send out the FSISAC report and the additional toolkits that you've put together through that.
Cool.
But anything you want to share, we'll send out a follow-up email. Okay, final question. Very, very important quantum question. In addition to being a quantum rock star, Peter is also a real life rock star. A very talented musician. So Peter, what is the most fun or coolest gig that you have ever played?
Ooh, okay. So if I single one out, it doesn't mean that others weren't cool too. Okay. Last year or this year in April, I was invited to come up and play at Tree Fort in Boise, Idaho. So unbeknownst to me, the city of Boise every year shuts down essentially for 10 days and has this enormous citywide festival where they do music and art and cooking and all of this stuff, right? There's like 40 venues around the city. It's mind-blowing. And so I was privileged to be invited and to come meet the Boiseans. I hope that's the right term. Wonderful place to be, fantastic people, great food, and really a fun time. And so, yeah, I'll be playing there again next year. So if anybody wants to pre-buy tickets, no, just joking. Yeah, so I've had a lot of gigs, but that has to be among the very coolest that I've done.
That's awesome. I will be there. I imagine a number of us will meet you there next year.
Cool. I'll hold you to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Peter. We'll transition into questions, and with that, I'll hand it back to Meg.
Thanks so much. Can't wait. I think that'll be a rocking concert. We just want to thank everybody for staying on with us today. Please drop in questions and your contact information into the chat. We'll get the Q&A rolling here in just a second. And I think we'll kick it off here. Got a great question coming in. Peter, I think this one is for you. So pulling back from Wells specifically, just looking at the financial ecosystem as a whole, you've given some advice on how to get started to think and research as a professional in that space. As a general rule, how seriously are financial institutions taking the quantum threat? What's your general pulse check?
Yeah, thanks for that question. And such an important one. Listen, I don't have visibility into a lot of other sectors like I do into the financial one, so I can speak just for finance. I can tell you that there's a tremendous amount of thought, consideration, and work being put into this. So we brought up FSISAC a number of times. If you're not familiar with it, FSISAC is a consortium of financial institutions, financial entities, and representing both the largest banks in the world as well as smaller banks. And there's a lot of energy, and the work products that we've been referencing are evidence of those conversations and that collaboration. And I have to mention this. Look, I've been in this game for a long time, and typically when we talk about our peer banks or peers in the industry, we talk about competitors, but this is a very different context. Here we refer to our peer banks as our collaborators. We're all in this together, and that includes academic as well as government entities as well. We all coordinate with Treasury and Homeland and Fed, and I mean, it's the whole ecosystem, and everybody, even globally, is concerned and working together on this.
Wonderful. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate the insight there. We've got another question coming in. I think this could be a tag team for you two. A couple questions floating in around cryptocurrencies and the perceived impact, what we can expect from quantum computing on cryptocurrencies, how people might be thinking about that security integrity today, as well as into the future.
Well, I'll take a stab at this first, Becca, if that's cool. So that's also a very good question. Cryptocurrencies are typically built upon a digital construct. So let's take Bitcoin, for example, which is built on blockchain, right? So when we talk about cryptocurrencies, we really have to talk about the underlying foundation or construct on which those cryptocurrencies exist. And so those really fall into, and I don't want to minimize the question, but they fall into the broader category of crypto security, right? So we would secure those mechanisms and those constructs in similar ways that we would secure real-time TLS sessions. So yeah, that's part of the formula that we're looking at in the long term. Without going into a lot of technical detail, there are specific use cases, but really it's part of that larger conversation of more robust digital cryptographic solutions.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add, Peter. I think you said it really well, but really when we think about asymmetric encryption, or when we're transmitting data over distances, a lot of the cleverness that we've used to make that happen in a secure way, that's what gets broken by a powerful enough quantum computer. So we work with a couple blockchain and wallet companies, so it's something that industry should definitely be thinking about as well.
Yeah, so let me just say one more thing about that. So you prompted me to do this. So one way to think about this is two very large buckets of cryptography: symmetrical cryptography and asymmetric or public key cryptography. So the primary difference here, in one way to describe it, is in public key cryptography, we establish these mechanisms by exchanging public keys. These are keys that are derived from our private key. And if compromised, if you can take that public key and you can factor out the prime numbers that are multiplied together to get that product, then you can have access to the private key encryption mechanisms. So that's really where that problem stems from. Anytime you exchange material to establish a session, that material that you're exchanging If it's compromisable, right, like RSA is, then that's really where the problem stems from. Now, symmetric cryptography is a bit different, right? We don't exchange key materials in that way, but symmetric cryptography, which is essentially a long stream of structured entropy or randomness, that could also be at risk, right? We talk about Shor's algorithm. A lot of people have heard about that, factoring large numbers, but there's Grover's algorithm, and maybe you've heard of that too. So this is an optimized search algorithm. So at this very early stage, we think there might be a significant risk of cryptanalysis threat from quantum computers using Grover's algorithm. We haven't demonstrated it. I'm not sure that we've got it peer-reviewed and provable, but we can see a trend in this area. So, you know, the considerations, they're pretty broad. So hopefully that helps distinguish it a bit.
Love it. Thank you. We've got time for just one more question. Becca and Peter would love to hear what you're most excited about, question from the crowd, about the intersection of AI, ML, and quantum, all these new things. What's got you really hyped up?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, I got into this. So I studied AI, I came out of the AI space into quantum because I was so stoked about what quantum means for the future of technology broadly, but where is AI going? It's going to, basically today's hardware limits us in what we can do. You can only fit so many transistors on a chip. Quantum opens a whole lot of possibilities, and a lot of those we don't even understand yet. I think the intersection, you know, that's something we're actively exploring as well in our platform, is when you get access to this kind of data, getting better data insights about how threats develop and adapt. But, you know, I think what I always like to say too is when we talk about, I'm big into kind of governance and ethics of technology and building a better technology future. There is no technology without data today, like basically full stop. And getting that data protection right early, and not even early, right? You know, it's not early anymore. It's time. Getting that data protection right now, so we set those foundations in place for everything that happens with AI, everything that happens in the future, is critical. So this is step one.
Yeah, good answer, Rebecca. So let me pull out my crystal ball for a second, and I'll have a tongue-in-cheek comment as well. So we're pretty sophisticated in being able to identify the risks from AI in cybersecurity, even generative AI, even how new it is, and its very quickly evolving capabilities. We're also very good at identifying the risk vectors in quantum technology. We're just beginning to look at where that intersection produces unique risk vectors. Now, having said that, we're also very early in being able to understand the implications of combining quantum technology with model training, machine learning, even in early visions and directions for more sophisticated neural nets and potentially cognizance, right? But we won't go down that road just yet. I do want to say that one of the things that I'm preparing for is a message to my new AI overlord masters on how I will serve them and to not be exterminated with the rest of the human race. But no, I'm joking, right? For all of us sci-fi fans, right? We're working very hard to ensure ethics and guardrails and, you know, emergency off switches for these new technologies that we're deploying.
Yeah. All in, and always say please and thank you to ChatGPT.
Yes. Goes around, comes around.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much. Peter, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on today. We really appreciate your insights. And for anybody that wants to hear more from Peter, please check him out. He's going to be the keynote for the Quantum Tech Europe coming up this September, the 18th through the 20th. So if you're in London, stop by. Please continue to drop questions into the chat. Our team will reach out. And if you'd like to see more of our demo, just let us know. Contact information over here on the right. And you can always find us at qsecure.com. Thank you so much, everyone. We hope to see you on the next webinar.
Thank you. And thank you, Peter. You're one of the people who inspired me to get into quantum. So it's an honor to talk to you. Thank you.
That's awfully nice. Thank you guys so much. I had a good time.